Clarice is a young FBI trainee navigating a challenging obstacle course at the Bureau's training camp. She is suddenly summoned to the office of Jack Crawford, head of the Behavioral Analysis Unit. Crawford assigns Clarice the unusual task of interviewing Hannibal Lecter, an incarcerated former psychiatrist and serial killer. The goal is to get his help in catching another serial killer known as Buffalo Bill. Clarice is sent to a maximum security mental institution in Baltimore. The facility's director, Dr. Frederick Chilton, guides her through the gloomy corridors while trying to flirt along the way. He warns Clarice of Lecter's danger and gives her instructions on how to communicate with him. Clarice descends to the basement where Lecter is being held in the last cell. Their first encounter is tense and intriguing. Lecter, standing behind a glass partition, demonstrates his incredible analytical skills, easily reading Clarice by her appearance, accent, and behavior. He agrees to help in the investigation, but demands in return that Clarice share personal information with him. In parallel, Buffalo Bill traps and kidnaps a young woman, Catherine Martin, the daughter of a U.S. senator. He keeps her in a deep well in the basement of his house, periodically dipping her in skin lotion and demanding that she rub it on her body. This causes a huge public outcry, and the FBI intensifies its search for the perpetrator. Clarice continues to meet with Lecter, gradually revealing to him the traumatic memories of her childhood. She tells him about the death of her father, about living on a farm with relatives, about trying to save a lamb from slaughter and the escape that followed. Lecter, in turn, provides coded clues that help advance the investigation. He hints that Buffalo Bill makes a suit from the skin of his victims, leading the investigation to believe that the killer may be connected to the sewing business. Clarice discovers an unusual butterfly chrysalis in the throat of one of Buffalo Bill's previous victims, which becomes an important clue. Entomologists determine that it is a rare species of deadhead butterfly, which narrows the search. Meanwhile, Lecter, using a paper clip stolen from Chilton, makes a brutal prison break. He kills 2 guards, crucifies one of them on the cell bars, and uses the body of the other to make a gruesome installation imitating the wings of a butterfly. Lecter disappears, leaving a trail of blood behind him. Clarice is shocked by this event, but continues to work on the Buffalo Bill case. The investigation leads Clarice to the home of the first victim, where she discovers a sewing room. This supports the theory that the killer is creating some sort of costume. Analyzing the evidence and psychological profile, Clarice concludes that Buffalo Bill suffers from gender dysphoria and tries to create a female costume for himself from the skin of his victims. The trail leads Clarice to the small town of Belvedere, Ohio. There she meets James Gum, a strange man who supposedly knew one of the victims. Upon entering his home, Clarice notices a dead head moth that makes her suspicious. Gum becomes nervous, and Clarice realizes that he is Buffalo Bill. A tense chase through the dark basement of the house begins. Clarice discovers the well where Catherine Martin is being held. Gum turns off the lights, leaving Clarice in total darkness while he himself, using a night vision device, pursues her. At the last moment, Clarice manages to hear the sound of a trigger being pulled. She turns sharply and fires at the sound, killing Gamba. Catherine Martin is saved. Clarice becomes a national heroine. At her graduation ceremony at the FBI Academy, she is personally congratulated by the director of the Bureau. However, at this solemn moment, Clarice receives a call from Hannibal Lecter. He is at an airport on some tropical island and calls to make sure Clarice is okay. Lecter says he's not going to pursue her and asks her to return the favor. He then spots his former jailer, Dr. Chilton, and after saying goodbye to Clarice, follows him, hinting at his sinister plans. The movie deeply explores the psychology of the main characters. Clarice Starling emerges as a driven and intelligent young woman who is trying to overcome her childhood traumas and prove her worth in the masculine world of the FBI. Her interaction with Lecter becomes a kind of psychotherapy, helping her to better understand herself and her motives. She struggles with her inner demons, particularly guilt for failing to save the lambs on her uncle's farm, which symbolizes her desire to save the innocent. Hannibal Lecter is one of the most complex and contradictory characters in the history of cinema. He appears as a brilliant intellectual, a skillful manipulator, and a brutal killer at the same time. His interest in Clarice balances between the professional curiosity of a psychiatrist and an almost fatherly concern. Lecter sees Clarice as a kindred spirit, someone who can understand his unique mind. Their dialogues are filled with psychological games and hidden meanings. Buffalo Bill, whose real name is Jamie Gum, is shown as a deeply traumatized individual. His crimes are a twisted attempt to resolve an internal conflict related to his gender identity. Gum does not accept himself and literally tries to create a new identity, a new body from the skin of his victims. His image evokes both disgust and pity, demonstrating how deep psychological trauma can turn a person into a monster. The movie is filled with tense and frightening scenes. Particularly notable are the episodes in the mental institution, where Lecter's cell is at the end of a long corridor, creating a sense of descent into hell. Every conversation between Clarice and Lecter is a psychological duel, where the stakes are not only information about Buffalo Bill, but also Clarice's own soul. Lecter's escape scene is shocking in its suddenness and brutality. The cold-bloodedness with which he massacres the guards and creates horrifying compositions out of their bodies emphasizes his inhuman nature. This scene also demonstrates Lecter's incredible intelligence, capable of escaping from a seemingly impregnable prison. The final chase at Buffalo Bill's house keeps the suspense going until the last second. The director skillfully plays on the fear of darkness and helplessness, making the viewer feel in Clarice's shoes, wandering in pitch blackness. When Clarice hears the click of the bolt and shoots, it symbolizes her finally overcoming her fear and becoming an FBI agent. The story is a profound exploration of the human psyche, the nature of evil, and the possibility of redemption. The movie asks tough questions about the boundaries of normalcy, what makes a person a monster, and the price one pays for delving into the dark depths of the human mind. It also raises themes of gender inequality, power, and manipulation, and explores the line between genius and madness. The relationship between Clarice and Lecter becomes the central axis of the film. Their interaction goes far beyond a simple exchange of information. Lecter becomes a kind of mentor to Clarice, helping her to understand herself and overcome her fears. At the same time, he represents a constant threat, a temptation to turn to the dark side. Clarice, on the other hand, is for Lecter an opportunity for intellectual and emotional contact, which he was deprived of in his imprisonment. The movie also explores the theme of transformation. Clarice is transformed from an insecure trainee to a competent FBI agent. Buffalo Bill seeks physical transformation through his horrific crimes. Lecter transforms from a prisoner to a free man, but his inner self remains unchanged. The movie leaves the viewer with many questions about human nature, the fine line between normality and pathology, and the possibility of understanding and possibly curing even the darkest sides of the human soul. This movie has become a classic of the psychological thriller genre, setting new standards of depth and complexity in the portrayal of criminals and those who pursue them.